A powerful local exhibit is composed of portraits of people based only on their descriptions. The visual renderings are derived from newspaper ads placed by slaveholders seeking to recover the quote, runaways and offering rewards for their capture. Joining us to tell us more about the inspiration for this exhibit is New York based artist Lillian Young. Lillian, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me this morning.
It's great to see you. Thanks for coming via video. Lillian, this is a really troubling and also beautiful series of portraits that you did. And
Thank
people
you.
who are watching the live stream will be able to see some of the portraits that you did. But can you just start by telling us more about what these portraits are? What are they made of? What do they look like?
Yeah, so these portraits, there's about 100 of them. Actually, the Ritz Museum has, I think, about 58, if I'm not mistaken. But these are portraits based off of the descriptions provided in runaway slave ads. So these are newspaper ads that were placed in newspapers all over the country asking for people's property, aka people, slaves, to be returned. And so a lot of times in these, as I was going through them, this is based off of an archive that I discovered in grad school called Freedom on the Move Project. And when I was going through them, I realized that the descriptions for these people were very generic for a lot of them, but also kind of unique. And so I started to try to picture what these people could possibly look like. And in doing so, I was realizing there's a problem with archives. We have all this information about these people, but it's very vague and it's from a lens that does not help us at all to actually see them. And these runaway ads are essentially these all of these individuals last in potentially only portrait of them. I don't know what happened to any of these people, and I always preface when I display this work that all of the images that you see of these people are incorrect. I don't know what any of these people actually look like. These are all from my own imagination, just because I don't have any other sources but this brief advertisement that was put in a newspaper.
And we should say that the faces of these individuals are actually composed of the words. So basically, you have rendered the ad that was placed and created their features, and then through the use of these words, essentially, it is a transcription of those ads.
Yeah, I most likely have dyslexia. Sometimes letters move, and I just haven't gotten it tested really. But it's sometimes hard for me to read. But I really like to manipulate words in order to like fit into certain boxes. I've done these kind of I call them like 1,000 word portraits since I was in undergrad, and usually I do them just by writing it all in pen. And but for this one, I'm a painter by trade, and I really wanted to add color and show these portraits and give these individuals who were treated as uh, less than a dog, at least a chance to be seen as a person, and for people to be able to know who they are, even if it is just my interpretation. But all the words you see are the entirety of the ad. So each person has the entirety of the ad on their face, but then you have in some of the advertisements, there are very specific details about a person that is listed. So some of them are listed as having big lips, so I will try to draw those a little bit more realistically than I would, still in my style. Everyone's eyes you can always see, because I do believe like your eyes are the window to your soul. And then you also have the skin tones. So some of them in the advertisements are described as a light skin, a Negro, a mulatto, all of these different things, but it's very like that could be so many different shades of people, except for the ones who are just described as a Negro. That's not a color as far as I know. I studied color for like 7 years. So I painted all of these on linen, which already is brown, so that way the brown of the linen can be a substitute for those who don't really have like a color assigned to them, I guess is the word you could use.
The database that you're talking about called Freedom on the Move, it contains more than 30,000 of these newspaper notices. Um, and I imagine going through that collection must have been difficult in creatively to kind of get to where you did, but also emotionally and intellectually, because they're very difficult descriptions. You talk about some of the characteristics that are described. Very often these are injuries that really kind of bring to the fore the brutality of slavery. People who are missing eyes or have burns or have mangled hands. that are all kind of indicators of the cruelty of that systems. So can you just tell us a little bit about how you process that, how you approach such a kind of awful subject?
Yeah, I've just recently, I will say, recovered is how I am saying this, because this was for my master's thesis, which was a 3-year program at Michigan State. So I started working on this. I've always had this idea in my head for years, and then I was able to get grants, and I was like, okay, we can finally do the big project that's been in our head of making these portraits of people. And in doing that, I was in a small studio space, and I started building these portraits. They're all like 17 by 20. And I did have to like slightly disassociate for like a year and a half or so while I was making them, just because I had to hang them somewhere. So I would enter my studio for like a year and a half every morning, and there'd just be a bunch of faces staring back at me. And for me personally, like I do know that my family on both sides are descendants from slaves, but I personally am like, I don't want to think about them potentially painting a family member, even how distant it could be, because that's just a lot. So I've decided to ignore that part. But for painting these people and trying to make sure that they are seen, it was very much like always checking with myself. I was seeing a therapist at the time and talking to her and being like, this is a lot for me to handle as one person. But also just like recognizing that I have the ability to like step away, but these people really didn't have that, which is not to say I needed to suffer, but I really wanted to make sure that's doing them justice and showing it, because as a Black historical artist, I do understand that a lot of times the way that we are taught in schools does not highlight what you can learn about Black history. It doesn't highlight all the stories. So I knew that it was very much a struggle for me to take on, but I wanted other people to be able to benefit from the struggle, which so far, since it's been on display, actually like globally, it's been taken in really well. And I'm honestly surprised by how well people really enjoy this exhibition, and that they're getting something out of it and able to see like this part of history that I saw. Because some of the injuries, like there are multiple where, yes, they're missing eyes. There's also a couple of them where they have scars across their necks, which could be an indicator of they were either about to be killed or an attempt at suicide. I'm not 100% sure. And then I always think back to one of the paintings where I actually had to call my grandma, my nan, to talk with her about like, should I do this painting? Because it was a group that ran away, a family, and it listed the ages of the children that were taken in this escape. And one of them was listed as being, I think, about like 8 months old, like they're a baby. And I was like a little bit, I don't know, not skeptical, but hesitant about painting that, because that's such a small face and such a big canvas. So I called my grandmother to talk to her about it, and she was like, it's the truth. You have to paint what is the truth. And ultimately, yeah, I painted that family, and one of the runaways is just a very small baby, which was very interesting to have to kind of like have that light bulb moment of, oh yeah, children did also have to face this and did not potentially, but did run away, and try to escape to freedom.
Sure. I mean, one of the ads is about a girl named Tina, and it describes her as, in the ad, quote, a girl about 13 years old with a linen frock, slender, and holds her head down when spoken to. So there's these kind of revealing descriptions. Also, one that I think is kind of unintentionally revealing of the author of the ad, about a woman whose given name is Elizabeth Scott, and the person writing the ad says, quote, "She must, I think, be trying to get to a free state. I'm not aware of any good cause for her leaving, save the love of liberty," which is just kind of a, an amazing blindness to what might have motivated someone to flee to freedom. And I guess, some of these, as we say, they're really harrowing descriptions and terrible circumstances. But in some ways, the presumption being that at least some of these people did make it to freedom.
Yeah, I have to keep believing that most of them made it, just because if I don't, that just makes me so sad. But I do know that some of them actually didn't make it. So these are runaway notices, but a handful of them, which count as runaway notices, are jailer notices. So all of them If the runaway notices, they have a price on them, which is the bounty for that person. So generally, it'll have their name, and then it'll say like, "Oh, I'll pay you $10 to bring them back to me." There's even one which is on display at the museum. I think it's Emery. His is a little bit different because he's worth, I think it's $20 brought in alive, but 25 dead, which is wild. But you also have jailer notices within all of these advertisements where it's mostly a jailer saying, "Hey, we've captured this runaway slave. They say they are from this place. Come pick them up, or we're going to sell them to the state to make back the money for having to house them." So it's very interesting to see that dynamic. And in reading a lot of these ads, it's interesting, like you said, to see just the thought process behind these enslavers of how they're like, I don't understand why they would run away to the north or even to Mexico, because a lot of them did run away to the south, like further south. And so it's interesting just to see how they can't, like, how they have purposely blinded themselves from understanding and just being ignorant about, like, I don't understand why they would want to leave what I provide them, which is a traditional thing. Like, you have the argument, I'm from the South, but you do have an argument from a lot of people who are like, oh, slaves didn't have it that bad because they were given shelter and food. And if you've been to those shelters, quote unquote, that they had, like, I've been to plantations, and those shelters are not great. Like, they are hovels, and they were forced to be packed in there like sardines. If they did anything that was deemed wrong, they could be killed for it or sold. Families were separated at the whim of whoever wanted to separate them. And it's very much, yeah, it makes sense why anyone would run away from it. Like, no one would want to be a part of that system. It's not beneficial to them, and they were treated like they were nothing for centuries.
Well, the exhibit is called the Runaways. It's part of a exhibit called The Problem with Archives. The artist is Lillian Young. Um, Lillian, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you talking about your work, and we appreciate your work.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys reaching out to me, and I hope people get to enjoy and see the show.
All right.